What rules? We didn't see any rules, did we, Charlie?
Don't you know the rules?
What rules?
You don't... Jesus Christ, you don't know the rules?
Have an aneurysm, why don't you?
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie.
What these walls offer for you is important. Salvation.
It's that time again to continue along the long and winding road on which we try to discover each and every rule necessary for making it out of a Friday the 13th movie alive, as we move on to part 2, introducing the world to one of the most iconic and infamous
The infamous
horror movie characters of all time.
Jason Voorhees.
Before we start nitpicking every last detail, let's do a quick recap of the 8 rules we have already discovered after the first entry in the franchise. Rule number 1, keep it in your pants. Rule number 2, do not hitchhike. Rule number 3, no one likes a clown. Rule number 4, no hanging with Puff. Rule number 5, stick with Shirley Temples. Number 6, use your brain. Number 7, if you're an authority, don't be a dick. And rule number 8, be nice to animals. As far as the total amount of times each rule was broken so far, unsurprisingly, rule number 1 had the most violations in the original with 6 instances, but coming in a strong second was rule number 4 with 5.
Negative side effects of medical marijuana, folks.
Will these rules hold up? Will we discover new ones along the way? Well, hold on to your butts because it's time to figure out the rules for surviving Friday the 13th, Part 2. This installment begins 2 months after the original ended, where we meet up with, oh no, the ultimate rule breaker final girl, Alice. Her screen time in this one is quite limited, so she doesn't get to do too much other than teach Drew Barrymore a lesson on how you open a movie by answering a phone before getting brutally murdered. So what rules does she break? Hard to find any in this one, so I'm forced to say she is merely having to atone for past offenses. So right off the bat, new rule number 9, sins carry over. You can only get away with drinking and toking and screwing and chopping off the head of a mother of an unstoppable killing machine for so long before you get a bit of comeuppance. The next victim is, oh shit, teen heartthrob Crazy Ralph is back. He's up to his usual sexy prophetic ways in this one.
I told the others. They didn't believe me. You're all doomed. You're all doomed.
Just another example of people being left speechless at his animal magnetism. Unfortunately, in the original, where he was just trying to give all those meddling teenagers a bit of healthy advice, in this one he crosses the line into straight up peeping Tom watching Ginny and Paul almost getting it on. Sorry, Ralph, Jason makes no exceptions to this rule, no matter how damn
Because the boy is hotter than hot. He's hot.
you might be. Next up on the chopping block is Deputy Winslow. I was a bit tempted to say he was guilty of not using your brain because after all, he is very wary of everything at Camp Crystal Lake.
But if I was you, I'd have located in the next county. You're too close.
So chasing off into the woods after a hooded hillbilly alone with no hope of backup is a pretty bad horror movie move. One might argue that he is just doing his job. Fine, okay, if that's the argument you want to go with, we'll roll with it. But he is 100% guilty of breaking rule number 7. If you're an authority, don't be a dick. This motherfucker is corrupt as hell. He has no warrant to enter that shack.
I assume you're a government agent. I would think you would know there's something in this country called due process, okay?
This is my own private domicile and I will not be harassed! Bitch!
But just like authority figure Steve Christie before him, he also gives excellent dying face. The first of our teen camp counselors to bite the dust is Scott. Not much to say about this creeper-ass face, as he's entirely too horned up, both shooting a slingshot at a booty and stealing the clothing of Terry as she went skinny dipping. He clearly got his just desserts. Speaking of Terry, she's the next to encounter Mrs. Voorhees' baby boy. She commits what I consider to be the gravest of sins as she ignores rule number 8, be nice to animals. After her beloved Muffin goes missing, let's see the amount of effort she puts into finding her puppy.
Muffin?
Terry, lunch.
Okay, I'm coming.
I guess we will overlook the fact she's making direct eye contact with something that's clearly about 6 foot taller than Muffin's eyeline could possibly be because, okay, whatever. This isn't the only instance of bad puppy parenting, as later in the movie, instead of continuing to search for Muffin, she decides, I'll just go skinny dipping instead. She could learn a valuable lesson from cinema's most learned scholars.
You got a pet. You got a responsibility. If your dog is lost, you don't look for an hour and then call it quits. You get your ass out there and you find that fucking dog.
So there you go, folks. Always look for your missing pets unless you want to be stabbed off screen and have your body dumped at a redneck altar. Then we have Mark, who nearly has what it takes to make it. Independent, driven, and when offered some of that sweet wacky tobacco is able to... But of course, like all great men, his undoing is in his trousers when he agrees to a secret rendezvous with Vicky. Before he is able to seal the deal, though, he is met with one of my personal favorite kills in any horror movie ever.
One more time!
Thank you for your sacrifice, Mark. It has filled my life with glee for years. The next victims are the couple duo of Jeff and Sandra, who, well, I don't really think we need to waste a lot of time here because it's obvious just what these two did that got them a good old-fashioned spearing, but what their biggest contribution could end up being is the possibility of a new rule: stay off the dance floor. We will keep an eye on when people cut a rug in the next few movies, though, before we officially add it to the list. Okay, Internet, we got a Ted problem. The fact that he lived through Part 2, despite clearly being a jokester character and getting blind, stinking drunk, are ones that have gotten more and more recognition among movie. Nerd! Which leaves us with the questions: why did he live and what ultimately happened to him? As far as the first question, obviously the only reason he lived is because he took his partying away from Jason's hunting grounds. Jason doesn't kill every single person that enjoys a drink, only the interlopers that come into his territory. It's not like Jason's out there chasing down the guys from Beer Fest, although that would make for an interesting sequel. So, by going out for that last night on the town, Ted inadvertently saved his own life. Not to question his final boy's skills, but had he stayed, he surely would have ended up sliced and diced. Now, as to what happened to him, once again, the talk from movie is that he eventually just found a motel to crash at in order to sleep the booze off, or made it back to camp and was the one that called the cops, alerting them to the massacre. Personally, I like to believe that Ted made it to that after-hour spot he was looking for with the waitress he had his eye on. After a dozen more drinks or so, he puts on his charm and winds up back at her place, breaking rule number 1 for good measure. He wakes up in the morning with a massive hangover, eventually turning on the news to discover, oh hey, all my friends have been macheted to death. He takes it badly and disappears for 30 years before he turns up under the assumed identity of Tad. Ted, as Tad, has now moved across the country, living in the Portland area, and works as an underground punk music journalist in order to hide from any revenge attacks from Jason. Do I care that this is mostly conjecture? No, not at all. This is my party and I will cry if I want to. The last on-screen death we see belongs to Vicky, who is the first of Part 2's double rule breakers. Reminiscent of the original strip Monopoly game of death, she manages to fit in a movie's worth of violations while she sits at a table, where she both whips out a fatty to Blaze, and then proceeds to continually attempt to pick up Mark in a most egregious fashion.
I only want your fingers. The one with the puck.
What do you want to play for?
Position.
Nice job, Meryl Streep. Very subtle character work.
Sadly, she's not able to seal the deal, but will forever be remembered with this iconic shot. Rest in peace, Vicky. Then we have Paul. Time again to go back to the movie talk amongst the...
Nerds! Nerds! Nerds!
Paul's fate is left very ambiguous. There's no official confirmation as to whether he lived or died. Some people say that Jenny just hallucinated the entire ending. Some people cite a newscast from Part 3 referring to the total amount of bodies recovered as evidence Paul did not die. Now, after hours of meticulous research, here is where I reside on this very important hot-button issue.
Oh, I've wasted my life.
Thank you for the reminder, comic book guy. Anywho, Paul's dead. Everything that played out on screen happened. Jason did not kill Muffin, which is another big debate on its own. After Jason jumped through the window and grabbed Jenny, somehow Paul rescued her, but in doing so, met his own demise. Now you might ask, why do I believe this?
Because he broke the rules.
Damn right. Thank you, Mr. Wonka. Evidence number 1.
These kids smoke better dope than I do.
Confirmation there, he loves smoking them jazz cigarettes. But no, that is not all. Paul's very much a double rule breaker, violating number 6, use your brain. When he and Jenny return to the cabin, she immediately recognizes something is wrong, but he is still all tra-la-la, all's well. After finding a bed full of blood, they have this interaction.
Paul, what's going on here?
Nothing.
Nothing. Really? Okay, so what's your plan now? Oh, just stumble around in the dark for a while? Let's see how that goes for you, Paul.
Paul, there's someone in this room. Paul, there's someone in this fucking room!
Those are not the instincts of a survivor, folks. Which brings us to final girl Jenny.
What's this guy supposed to be, the ultimate badass?
Damn right, that sums up Jenny in a nutshell. I know it's early in the series and there's still lots of final girls to go, but she could end up being the finalist of all the final girls. Jenny is on constant alert, she hides when she needs to hide, she fights when she needs to fight, not to mention she's very intelligent, as she does the exact thing I would do in this sort of situation. Just get the hell out of Dodge. It's really just bad luck that she ends up at Jason's cabin, but you know, when she's there, she doesn't panic. She quickly thinks on her feet and comes up with the whole pretend to be Mrs. Voorhees trick on Jason. You know, unlike Alice, she is a textbook example of following the rules and gets the Griswold seal of approval. On just a side note, I will say it was fun seeing early redneck Jason when he could still run and was spry and frankly alive. It's a long way from where he will end up in just a few short films. Now for a summary of how the rules played out in Friday the 13th Part 2. Number 1, Keep It In Your Pants was easily the most broken with 6 instances. I have a feeling we shall see that 1 is going to end up being the runaway winner as far as violations go. Number 4, No Hanging with Puff, once again hangs on into second place, even though I admit it is possible some of the counselors might have got away with visiting Mary Jane and it just not being on screen. Rules 6 through 9 all had 1 instance of being broken, and this might actually be the last time we see number 9, Sins Carry Over, being broken, you know, depending on how a certain Mr. Jarvis performs later in the series. No breaking of rules 2, 3, and 5 in this one, although I will admit there are some gray areas over 3 and 5. We did see drinking, but it was done at a bar away from Jason's hunting grounds, and Ted is very much a clown character, but through sheer dumb luck he became a horror movie anomaly, and his bad habits actually ended up saving his life. And despite some blurry lines, I feel good about the current list we have going. Now for how the numbers look over the course of the first 2 films. Number 1, Keep It In Your Pants with a very healthy lead at 11. Number 4, No Hanging with Puff, not too far behind at 7. And the rest are all relatively even in the 1 to 3 range. That's it for this installment. Until next time, bye-bye. Have fun storming the castle.